Divide my lecture into 5 parts. Part 1, what are the structural forces that are driving this contest? You've got to understand that there are structural forces driving this contest. Secondly, what mistakes were made by China, what mistakes were made by US, because when you have a contest, it's also a result of mistakes. Number 3, the question, and this is what Irwin mentioned in his remarks also, who will win? Will China win or United States win? And it's a very interesting question to debate. And number 4, how do other countries react to this contest? And especially how the ASEAN countries and how Indonesia should react. And we should discuss that too. And finally, the last part 5 is how do we prevent the worst case scenarios? So these are the 5 parts of my presentation. So I'll start with the structural forces. And I emphasize structural forces to tell you that that is not driven by personalities. As you know, the US-China geopolitical contest was started by Donald Trump, right? Then Donald Trump lost the elections. Joe Biden won. Now, Donald Trump is not a nice guy. Joe Biden is a very nice guy. But no difference. The contest carries on. Whether the president is not a nice guy or the president is a nice guy, it doesn't matter. Personalities don't matter. It's driven by structural forces. And so the first structural force, this is a 2,000-year rule of history, that when the world's #1 emerging power today, which is China, is about to overtake the world's #1 power, which today United States, the #1 power always pushes down the #2 power. No #1 power likes to give up its #1 position. Never. It's never happened before in history. Everybody is always trying to keep their #1 position. And so this is what the United States is trying to do. And the United States knows that sometime in the next 10 to 15 years, China's economy, which is already bigger than the United States in purchasing power parity terms, is actually going to become bigger in nominal market terms sometime in the next 10, 15 years. And then, of course, the United States has got to adjust to becoming #2. And that's very, very difficult for them to do. And that's why United States is trying to stop China. And that's why President Trump launched his trade war against China to try and slow down China's economic growth. That's why he launched it. He imposed tariffs, he imposed sanctions, thinking that this will slow down China's economic growth. So that's the first structural force. But the first structural force everybody talks about. The second structural force, which nobody talks about, is what is called the fear of the yellow peril. Now, this is something that no one in the West speaks about. But in the Western mind, there has always been a fear of what I call the yellow man, and this goes back to the 13th century when the Mongols almost conquered Europe. And for almost 700-800 years, the Westerners have lived and are being dominated by the yellow people, the non-white people. And I'm saying this quite seriously, because if you think I'm imagining this, I'll give you one historical fact. At the end of the 19th century, now this is 130 years ago, the United States Congress passed an act called the Chinese Racial Exclusion Act. Now, when the United States Congress passes an act like that, you can see it's the fear of the yellow man that is real. And so and I add that because, in life, as you know, we think we make decisions with our heads. Actually, no. our emotions also play a role in our decision making. So since the Westerners are frightened of the yellow man dominating the world, that becomes an emotional reaction to China. And I want to emphasize the emotional dimension because some of the actions taken by the United States against China are not rational. So what is the cause of it? It's emotional. It's the yellow peril. So you must know, you must understand the history of the yellow peril if you want to understand US-China relations. And the third structural force that is driving this US-China geopolitical contest is what I call a bipartisan disappointment in the United States against China. And what is the cause of the bipartisan? I mean, Democrats and Republicans, two major parties. Both are equally disappointed with the United States, with China. And why are the two American parties disappointed with China? They say that, when the United States engaged China, United States was trying to open China's economy. And after opening up in China's economy, they thought that China would open up its political system and China would become a democracy like the United States of America. And the Americans said, okay, we are a democracy, China is a democracy, then we can, both live happily ever after. But as you know, China today is not a democracy. And China is not going to become a democracy anytime soon because the Chinese have their own history, their own culture, their own political tradition. So they have to have their own political system. And the Chinese don't think that democracy, American democracy, can work in China. So they have something different. But the Americans find this unacceptable. They are so disappointed. And because they are disappointed, they are angry with China, and that's part of the reason why they launched this contest. So you can see that this contest is being driven by deep structural forces.